Hello everyone, and welcome to another featured community build. And today we have a build by Pazuzu, and this is a max HP Warden tank build that still hits hard. This is a really cool build. It has a lot of really awesome set synergy. It is very bulky, sports a lot of control. So not only can you tank your opponents, but you can hold them in spot. And yes, look at this burst. Pazuzu managed to build huge burst on his max HP Warden. Look at this. Oh my god, absolutely tearing this guy down. So this Warden build is sporting an Ice Staff on the back bar with Sword and Board on the front bar, and Pazuzu actually included two specs, one with Sword and Board and one with Dual Wield. And in the footage here, you guys will see a variety of the specs that he plays. And just look at this control. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love the control on a Warden, and putting this HP spec in the heat of things. Really like this build. So if you guys enjoy this build, feel free to hit that like button. Check out this man's YouTube channel. A link to his channel, of course, will be in the description of the video down below. If you guys are interested in sending in your own builds for the channel, or even interested in sending in PvP clips for a top 5 submission, you guys can send them in to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. And there is, of course, more information in the description down below if you guys want to know what I need from you for a submission. So without further ado, guys, a massive shout out yet again to Pazuzu for sending in such an awesome build. Really sweet spec. I hope that you guys enjoyed this build as much as I did. It was really fun to put together and try out on the PTS. So let's begin. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the build. So to begin, we are an Argonian on this bad boy. And Pazuzu said Argonian is your best bet for a few reasons. Number one, we get a max HP bonus off Argonian, and this is an HP-based Warden, so that's going to be really awesome. And then number two, Argonian gets a lot of sustain via its potion passive returning resource. So we're actually going to be utilizing the Argonian for the resource sustain portion of this as well. Now, taking a look at our max stats on this build, you guys can see we're coming in at just under 17k Magicka, over 15k Stam, and a whopping 51k HP. Now, we're going to heal up really quick so we can proc our Warden passives here. And here we go. We've got 55k hit points fully buffed on this build. So we've got a lot of hit points on this spec. Now, something I do want to mention right off the bat is that this is set up to be a no CP build. So this is supposed to work the way that we have it here in No Champion. Now, I am taking a look at this build in the Champion campaign. However, that's just something I want to let you guys know from the sustain aspect of this build. It should actually have tons of sustain for the CP, as this is set up for no CP sustain right now. Now, taking a look at our sustain on this build, we have got just under 13k Magicka, and 637 Stam and 370 health. Now, we are a vampire on this build, and when we buff up, our sustains go up a little bit more, almost 1500 Magicka. Now, we predominantly use Magicka abilities on this build. The stamina sustain, we can actually get a huge amount back just from doing heavy attacks, so our stam sustain is totally fine in that department. And the mag sustain, this plus our Blue Betty plus heavy armor will actually give us a lot of mag sustain on this build, so we won't need to be pulling tons of heavy to get the sustain that we need. Alternatively, we can also change up the way that we run the gear on this to give us a little bit more sustain as well, and we'll get into that when we check the gear out. Taking a look at our weapon spell damage on this build, we don't have a lot of weapon spell damage, and that's because we're playing a max HP tank. A lot of the damage that we deal on this build is going to be coming from the sets that we wear and not from our damage dealing statistics here. Our weapon and spell crit is both sitting at 20%, so we're sitting at base weapon spell crit for champion campaigns. Now, this build you can run instead of the Leeching Vines. You could go for your Lotus here, heal, the blue Lotus, and that will give you your spell crit bonus as well on this build. However, as a lot of your damage and a lot of your healing is hit point based, and it kind of comes from proc sets, etc., I feel like you're not really wanting to invest too heavily into spell crit, but it can help because we do have that hit point based field that will be affected by spell crit as well. So it's up to you if you want to run that buff or not, and you can always get this buff from the potion too if you want. Taking a look at our physical spell resistance, we are with fairly respectable heavy armor values. We've got just under 30k physical resist, just over 32k spell resist, and then 2,400 crit resist. Now, the crit resist is a little bit lower on this build, and it's because we are an HP-based spec. If you want to have more crit resist, you can always drop some infused traits on the gear for more impen. You lose a little bit of max stat, however, you will get that crit resist that you may be seeking on this spec. Now, taking a look at the Mundus that we're using, we have got the Lover here. And the Lover was chosen because it is by far the best damage increasing option for a build like this. The only thing that the Lover will not increase our damage is our Oblivion Glyph. And outside of that, everything else is going to get boosted by the Lover. So this is going to be very helpful for increasing the damage of this spec in particular. And then the food that we're using is the Increase All Primary Stat food. This is just here to give us the bulk stat that we need in order to have the resource and stuff that we need to run around, break free, and cast our abilities. And I can't find the food. There it is. So it's just giving us our magicka, our stamina, and our health. Really important for this build to have that. We don't really need huge amounts of sustain outside of what we already have. So this is great just to bulk up our max stat all around. And then we are a vampire on this build, like I did mention. Now, I'm a stage 1 vampire right now because I'm on the PTS, and your vampirism starts stage 1, level 1. So I couldn't actually really put the vampire abilities and skills on here. So the regen should be a little bit better if you had your vampirism passives and were a stage 4 vampire. Now, Pazuzu did say that vampirism is very important for this build. He said that the undeath in particular is very nice for keeping you alive, especially because you have these HP-based heals. So something like undeath is going to allow you to just really tank on low HP, making you bulkier and making your heals essentially better because you're taking less damage from your incoming attacks. So undeath is going to help out a lot for tanking on this build. And then, of course, we have the Blue Betty if we need to purge some fire stuff as well. So we have a bit of counter to maybe one of the weaker aspects of being a vampire as well. And then finally, for the potion on this, guys, like I mentioned, you can run a potion that gives you the spell crit bonus, and that will help with this build to give you a little bit of spell crit. However, you can just go with tri-pots as well. Any potion that you really feel you want to use, maybe a movability pots, whatever you feel like you want to go for. You got a lot of options and flexibility with potions on this spec. Alright, so let's take a look at the gear here, and we're going to go through 2 gear sets for this build, actually. So we're going to go through the main gear set, and then another backup gear set if you like. So the first set we're looking at here is Valken Scoria, and this is going to be very important just to increase the amount of damage that we deal on an HP tank. Valken Scoria, of course, gives us the 1-piece max HP as well, so that's really nice for an HP tank. But then, of course, we get that chance to proc that meteor for almost 13k flame damage, and it will deal splash damage to enemies as well. So I think that this is really great on this build because we have a lot of abilities that have an opportunity to proc Valken Scoria, and we have a lot of damage over time kind of fields, and we're even running the poisons on our back bar here in this variation. So we're going to have a very easy time getting the Valken Scoria to proc, and it's really going to help us put that big damage on this build where we're kind of lacking because we are, you know, an HP tank. So this is going to help, you know, give us that damage. The next set that we're running is the Storm Knight, and this set here is really nice for defensive, offensive gameplay, and it fits really nicely on this build because we have so much Immobilize and Chilled on this spec. So the way this is going to work is we get some spell resist, and max health. Nice for our resists on this build. And then when we take non-physical damage, we have a 10% chance to shoot out 6,000 shock damage to all enemies within 5 meters for 2 seconds. Every 6 seconds. Now, this is a nice kind of AoE pulse because it fits really well with our fields. If we have our fields down like so, we'll be proccing Valken Scoria, we'll be proccing Storm Knight when we're getting attacked, and everything that gets stuck in these fields is going to be feeling a lot of pressure from these combination of sets, and that's really what we want on this build. Now, the next set that we're running on this spec is the Dolimish, and this is where your big boy burst is actually going to come from. Now, we have our other two sets, which are helping us put out damage on this build for sure, but this is where our biggest controlled burst on this spec is going to come from. We get max health, weapon and spell damage in the 4-piece. When we use a fully charged melee heavy attack on a taunted monster or an enemy who is stunned or immobilized, we'll deal a bonus 17k physical damage, and this is on a 7-second cooldown. Now, this is going to allow us to put huge burst into our opponents. We, of course, have an instant immobilized with crippling shards, and we have an instant stun with drain essence. So we can easily get our opponent stunned or immobilized, and then hit them with that really powerful heavy attack, get a Valken Scoria proc, maybe we even get a Storm Knight proc, our enchant proc, and we can start to deal a lot of damage on this build, even on the max HP tank. And this is really where the combination of these sets is going to be very, very deadly when you get them all to really start working on top of each other. Now, the final set that we're actually running on this build is the Maelstrom's Ice Staff. And this bad boy is here to throw down that ice field and give us bonus light and heavy attack while we're in that ice field, or while an opponent's in that ice field. And this is actually really nice because this will transfer over to our sword and board bar, giving us bonus damage on our sword and board bar. And because our base light and heavy attack is so low, this is going to be really nice just to help push that much higher than it would be because we're running a very max HP tank focused spec. So this is going to pair really well for upping the damage. Now, we're going to take a look at the traits on this bad boy. We have gone with charged on the Maelstrom Ice Staff because we actually have the lethal poisons on the back here. And these poisons will proc when we're in our field. Even if we're on our other bar, we can get the poisons to proc from people standing in this ice field. So we actually get a lot of whammy from having the Maelstrom Ice Staff on this build, especially with the poisons that I have now unequipped here. So there you go. And then, of course, we have gone with the charge status for the increased chance to apply the chilled status, as well as other status effects. Our poisons are poison damage, so they can apply the poison status effect, and having a charged weapon will increase our chance to apply that poison status, meaning that we could potentially deal more damage over time when we get that proc. So there's just more whammy on the lightning staff here. The charge is just going to fit really well with the fact that we're an ice staff on the Warden, and then we've got the poisons. And then for the sword and board bar, guys, we've gone with infused on the sword and then infused for the shield as well. The sword is with the Oblivion damage glyph. Now, Oblivion damage is, I think, your best bet here because we don't have super high crit rates. And Enchants can crit, except the Oblivion damage one cannot. Now, this one I think is your best bet just because we have the low crit rate, and it's going to deal big amounts of damage to your opponents, and it ignores all armor. That's going to be super great for fighting other bulkier opponents in PvP as well. And then the shield, we have the infused health enchant. This is important to give us a little bit more max HP on our front bar here, which does have our HP-based heals and damage attacks on it. Now, taking a look at the jewelry, Pazuzu has actually gone with a mix of Bloodthirsty and then a single healthy, and I actually really like this, and it's something that I had actually never thought of for a build like this, and it's quite brilliant. So Bloodthirsty, the two of them together are going to give us 20% additional damage against an enemy under 25% HP, and this is going to apply to all our proc sets. This is going to apply to Valken Scoria, Dolamish, Storm Knight, our infused Oblivion glyph, everything, our poisons. And this is particularly nice because it is the only way to actually increase the damage of these sets with our jewelry traits, outside of just going for HP, which we're stacking more defensively than offensively for the build. So I thought this was an incredibly brilliant pick to put the Bloodthirsty here, giving this build a lot of kill potential against things like Sorks and Nightblades, going for that healing ward, especially at low HP. This is really going to help us bring those opponents down. Now, the enchants on these bad boys are full Magicka recovery. Very important to have that for the sustain. If you find you're running out of some stam recovery here too, you can go for more stam sustain here. However, I think the way this build plays, you're best off focusing purely on mag recovery here, because the stam sustain, you'll get a lot out of your heavy attacks. And then on the gear, guys, it is 4 pieces of impenetrable with 3 pieces of infused. And like I had mentioned earlier, Pazuzu said if you want more impen, you can drop the infused here. It's kind of up to the user. Now, the enchants on these bad boys, they are all max health glyphs except one, a single tri-stat Hacky Joe. Now, the Hacky Joe can cost a bit more, so all max health is a fine substitute. However, if you can do the single Hacky Joe, I would recommend that you do. Now, let's talk about our alternative kind of gear swap on this build. And it is kind of the same thing, except we actually switch up to dual wield, and instead of running the Storm Knight set, we run Torag's Pact. And this alternative setup here is pretty much the same thing, but a little bit more offensively rather than defensively focused, and we focus a little bit more on cranking out more controlled damage out of those glyphs, as opposed to having that AoE kind of spread damage from the Storm Knight set. Now, this is a great alternative if you want to try this setup out as well, especially if you don't have the Storm Knight set and you don't want to farm it, or if you only farmed the Dolimish set, and for example, you couldn't get your hands on the Dolimish weapons, or you even couldn't get the Maelstrom Staff. This is a great alternative because you actually get to, because you can actually enjoy this build with Torag's Pact and the Dolimish set without having to get the Maelstrom Staff either. And I like this, that Pazuzu included this alternative build, simply because it allows people who maybe don't have access to all the gear to still play this set. Now, the only kind of hard set you'll still have to get is the Dolimish set, but if you run Torag's Pact, you can, of course, run it in your gear and then just run Torag's Pact weapons and drop the Maelstrom altogether. Now, taking a look at the Torag's Pact set, you can see it really brings up the enchant damage values here, which is going to be really nice for the outgoing damage on this build, and it will help really control that burst as well. And then finally, if you want to go the Torag's Pact spec, you're also going to want to run an infused Maelstrom Ice Staff. And then the enchant that you run here is kind of up to you. Pazuzu said the the magic damage that restores magicka when it deals damage is actually a really good option. And this is going to give you a huge amount of sustain off your Blockade of Frost, which is really, really nice. And it will increase the damage as well. So this is a really good alternative if you want to have a little bit more controlled burst versus the defensively oriented spec going for the Storm Knight route. Now, let's take a look at the abilities that we're running on this build. And we're going to start on our front bar here, and I'm just going to actually change the gear back to the original spec that we were running on this bad boy. So taking a look at our first bar here, the first ability we have is Bird of Prey. This is here for that minor berserk. This is going to affect all of our outgoing damage, including our proc sets and our poisons. So very important that we have Bird of Prey on our front bar here with our Dolimish, of course. And then it gives us access to Major Expedition, so a little bit of speed here too, which is going to be nice. And then Major Endurance as well, but not really huge for this build. The next ability we have is Drain Essence. This is going to be your primary burst heal when your health begins to get low. It is also going to be a primary stun for this build. The stun on this ability is actually really nice because it's very fast, so you'll have an easy time going for a stun into a heavy attack on this, and maybe even catching your opponents off guard with it. The amount of damage it deals is based on your spell damage and your spell crit, so it doesn't deal a huge amount of damage on a health-based spec. However, the heal on this build is based on your max health, so you will actually restore a huge amount of HP when you use this heal. 25% of your missing health every 1 second for 3 seconds. So that's halved in PvP, but that's still a massive HP-based heal. It's going to be really, really nice on this build. And then the next ability that we have is Polar Wind, and this is going to be your secondary HP-based heal for this spec, and this is the one that you kind of want to have up all the time as kind of a preliminary heal over time. It's going to give you an 18% heal of your max health instantly, and then 10% over 10 seconds, so a little bit of a burst heal and a heal over time. Pair it with the Drain Essence, and we actually get some serious health-based healing power on this spec. The next ability we have is Shimmering Shield, and this is a really good ability for maintaining your ultimate on the Warden. Its amount of damage that it absorbs is based off your max HP, so pretty much no projectile will hurt you if you have this shield up. You will not take projectile damage until this shield is gone. And then, of course, you restore magicka when the projectiles hit you as well. So you get to return a bit of this ability's cost too. But this is mostly here for that major heroism and that projectile management at a distance. Help us keep a lot of ults up on this build, as well as have a very strong range defense. And then the last normal ability we have is Gripping Shards. And this is going to be your primary HP-based attack. And this is a really good ability for a few reasons. Number one, It's going to be HP based, so we actually deal a decent amount of frost damage with it when we use it. It's not a huge amount, I know. It's not going to compare to a Magicka or Stamina DPS build. However, it is going to be some damage on top of our sets, and it's going to really stack with everything else. So it's going to come in handy in that aspect. We're going to snare everybody 30% when we hit them with it. We're going to immobilize everyone when we hit them with it. So this will lead right into a Dolimish proc, just like our Drain Essence. So we have a real easy time making sure we can get those Dolimish procs out. So yeah, really great ability for this build. And then of course it can apply the chilled status, which is just going to slow our opponents down even more. And then our ultimate on this spec, we have gone with Permafrost. And yeah, you guys know why this is here. 70% snare for anything that gets caught in it. We've got a fairly beefy amount of frost damage still. It's not huge, but it's still pretty decent, even though we're a max HP based build. Major protection on a build like this, that's just rude. And then finally, damaging an enemy 3 times in the storm will stun them. So you'll actually be able to time and chain really, really strong Dolimish procs with this ultimate yet again. So more synergy for the build. This ultimate will proc your Valkynscoria as well, and the defensive nature of it pairs really well with the Storm Knight set as well. So really great ultimate for this build to control, attack, and defend. And then on our back bar, guys, the first ability that we have is Blockade of Frost. You know why this is here. This is the synergy with our Maelstrom Frost Staff. We get that damage over time with it. It's not a huge amount, but it can proc our Scoria, so that's going to be really nice. And then, of course, this ability will either proc the enchant that we're running on this staff or the poisons that we're running on this staff. And then we get a 60% snare. The 60% snare is really nice. And then, of course, things can become immobilized in this field, and that will just allow you to lead into more Dolimish procs as well. The next ability we have is Blue Betty. I think this is a fantastic ability for a Warden. We get that Magicka sustain. We get the major sorcery buff, which is kind of nice, but it really doesn't have a huge impact on this build. And then finally, we get that Netch to remove a negative effect. It's completely free to cast to remove that negative effect. So this is going to give us a little bit of condition management on this build as well. And then the next ability we have is Leeching Vines. And I talked a little bit about this one. Pazuzu said that you can go with a lot of different abilities over the Leeching Vines here. You could always go for the Blue Lotus for a little bit more spell critical, maybe up that damage a little bit more on your frost fields. But I really feel like Leeching Vines is an excellent option here. Another great option would actually be going for the Psijic Order Meditate ability. Meditate is going to be an excellent option for this build just to give you more bulk and tankiness. But the Leeching Vines is a great option for sustain as well. So you got a lot of flexibility with what you want to pick here. Kind of up to you. And then the next ability we have is Corrupting Pollen. Now this is going to be nice for a little bit of a heal for you and your allies, but the big reason we have this is for that AoE Major Defile. Now something to note about this build is that it is an HP based build, and the damage that it does comes from its sets, so it is kind of limited and it's not going to deal massive amounts of damage like a damage focused build would. Now giving that Major Defile is just going to help us make up for the fact that maybe we can't deal that huge amount of damage because our opponents will have a lot of trouble healing away the damage that we do. And this AoE Defile is going to be so freaking powerful. Seriously, it's going to be so powerful for you. It's going to have a huge effect on the fights that you have and a huge effect on your opponents because it'll allow you to really wear them down. And this is a very cheap AoE Defile, so it fits really, really well with this spec. And then finally, guys, the last ability we have is Ice Fortress. And this is here for those defensive qualities that it offers. Major Resolve, Major Ward for the physical spell resistance buffs. And then, of course, Minor Protection. Yeah, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. And for the ultimate on our Frost Staff bar, you guys yet again get a bit of flexibility here. You can go with the Enchanted Forest for a bit more healing power, giving you that ultimate burst healing. And then, of course, this is a great ultimate because you'll pretty much have your next ult or the Nether Forest ready to go, especially if you are keeping your Shimmering Shield up. So you can also go for the Vampire ultimate here. The Devouring Swarm is going to be a good option. But we really do have Permafrost, so Devouring Swarm is kind of like Permafrost. I feel like going for a defensive / utility ult is the way to go here. And Pazuzu, of course, said go for Enchanted Forest. So there you go, guys. Let's take a look at the champion points on this build. So we're going to start in the Tower Tree here. And like I mentioned before, this is a no champion build, so I actually added these champion points in myself because Pazuzu didn't include them. However, we're just going to go through where I think we should put CP if you guys want to bring this into a champion campaign. So in the tower tree, we got 28 Warlord and 2 Sprinter. Got to break free, and we are going to sprint. Really, we just had a few points left here. Mostly for that Warlord, we got to break free. In the Lover tree, we have got 43 Arcanist, 32 in Mooncalf, and 43 in Tenacity. So big focus on Arcanist and Tenacity because we have mostly Magicka recovery out of our recoveries. Tenacity is going to be the way to go for that stamina recovery, and our mag recovery off the Destro heavy attack gives us a little bit more Magicka sustain there. And then Mooncalf for that Stam Sustain. We don't have a huge amount of Stam Sustain, so just a little bit in Mooncalf here. And then 2 points in Healthy because I honestly had 2 points left over that I didn't really have a good spot to put. And it's because I stacked the Shadow Tree, 31 Tumbling, 31 Shadow Ward. We got to break free, or sorry, we got to roll dodge, and we have to block. That is PvP, so we have a nice equal spread there. And then 58 in Befoul to make that Corrupting Pollen even bigger of a heal debuff. Yeah, this is really, really nice for that healing debuff that it will help us get. In the Apprentice Tree, we have got 32 Elemental Expert and 32 Spell Erosion. Nothing in the crit here. Just focus on the flat damage increase and the penetration, and that's because we have a fairly low crit rate on this build. In the Atronach Tree, we have got 81 Master at Arms, 2 Physical Weapon Expert, and I actually went for 37 Shattering Blows, and hear me out why we went for this. So Master at Arms, of course, for direct damage increase. That is all of our damage. So this is very important that we stack this tree very heavily. And then 37 Shattering Blows because of things like Healing Ward, Sorks with their shields. We're already running the Bloodthirsty trait as well. So this means that when we have an opponent on low HP like that, if they're using damage shields, we're actually going to have better kill potential against them. And I stuck away from putting points into Physical Weapon Expert and Staff Expert simply because our base attack with our Physical and Staff is already so low that it wouldn't have a very big impact. And I felt like Shattering Blows would have a bigger impact overall, especially in Champion PvP where we have a lot of ambient damage shields getting tossed around anyway. The important passives that we get here are Tactician. We're not going to be rolling a lot, but extra off balance is extra off balance. You can't say no to that. And then taking a look at the Ritual Tree, guys, we've got 32 in Mighty, 28 in Piercing, and 26 in Thaumaturge. Focus on Mighty Piercing for that flat damage and penetration increase. Nothing in the crits because we will not be critting a lot. Dolimish can't crit anyway. And then Thaum for our damage fields. This is going to help increase a bit of damage on our fields, as well as the poisons that we run will be affected by Thaum as well. So there you go, guys. Taking a look at our red tree, we have got 61 Ironclad and 60 in Resistant. Big focus on reducing incoming direct damage. A lot of burst is direct damage, so we're going to want to make sure that we're resistant to that. And then resistant to increase our crit resist. We got to have crit resistance, man. Very important for PvP. In the Lady Tree, we have got 32 Hardy, 32 Elemental, and 31 Thick Skin. Very nice equal spread here to reduce from physical, from magical attacks, and to reduce incoming damage from damage over time. So, yeah, just an even spread in this tree I think is the best way to go. And then in the Lord Tree, we've got heavy focus on heavy armor, and then 11 in quick recovery. So a little bit of healing power here, and a big focus on the heavy armor focus because we actually get a lot of spell resistance from either the Torag's Pact set or the Storm Knight set. They both actually give a lot of spell resist, so we're going to give that heavy armor bulk that this build kind of is lacking in this area here. So there you go. And that is the champion points, guys, and that is the build. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into that PvP commentary. So to preface the commentary, this is, of course, a no CP build that Pazuzu had intended to use for Battlegrounds. So we've got a lot of Battleground footage of this build. So to begin here, we can see, wow, look at that combo. So he starts by setting up his burst on this DK with his fields, and then goes for the Permafrost, gets the stun with the Permafrost into the heavy attack Dolimish, and burns him down. Huge amounts of burst, and just kind of showcasing the basic combo. You start with your fields and then go for that Dolimish heavy. And here we can see again, he goes for his buffs, goes for the Vampire Drain to stun him into the Dolimish heavy attack. Look at that damage. Really making sure to utilize that Dolimish proc and land that burst when you really need it. And here you can see he's just going to give him a few pokes with the staff, set the fields down here, getting the poisons off on the opponents, and sets his fields down yet again, gets the immobilized there, forces the roll, goes for his ultimate, and here you see a massive wipe. Oh my gosh, he brings down both players. Dolimish heavy attack off the stun there and brings down the last player. He took down all 4 players there while getting sniped from up top. Man, I just don't even have words. Look at that tank gameplay. So he comes in on these guys here. He sets his fields down, goes into his ultimate, goes for the, tries to go for the heavy attack, but ends up getting stunned by the opposing player there. And these guys actually just die. Oh my gosh, they just die from the Valken Scoria, from the damage over time. Everything is too much pressure, and there you really get to see, I think in no CP, because we have a little bit less resource to work with than a CP campaign, all of these effects are going to have a very strong damage effect on your opponent. And here we see on the in the Imperial City, we got these werewolf here jumping on top of him with a friendly player, and look at the wear down on this build. Look at how much damage he can do. The corrupting pollen with that heal debuff, just not allowing these yellows or these red players here to get their hit points back, and he's just going to continue to keep up the pressure. This guy goes into stealth, throws his AoE field down, pulling him out of stealth. There's another Scoria proc. Oh my gosh, this poor Nightblade has got nothing left in the tank. And look at this, Pazuzu's just toying with him. Pazuzu's got the ult ready to heal just in case he has to. He doesn't even need to heal. This Nightblade's still trying to attack him, still trying to put the damage in. The guards are throwing the negates, and the Eclipse is down. There's the ultimate, there's the stun, and the Dolimish heavy attack to bring him down. And there you really see such a durable and tanky build, and you can just out-sustain and turn around on players. So excellent play there by Pazuzu. And, of course, these guys are going to come back, and there you see the Templar jumps on top of him, goes for a wrecking blow into the jabs. Pazuzu just easily tanks it out, goes for his heals, sets down the corrupting pollen to make sure he's got that heal debuff, sets down his fields. There's the stun and the heal off the vampire drain to get a bit of health back there. The Templar goes and responds with the heal. Pazuzu takes a bad fear here, but he manages to break it after a few seconds there, goes into his ultimate and throws up his HP-based heals. There's a huge Dolimish heavy attack off the stun in that ultimate to bring that Templar down, and now he's left to fight this guy here, and making sure to get those heavy attacks and get the stuns in with the vampire drain. Huge amount of healing off that vampire drain. There you see a lot of hit points come back. He resets his field, sets down the corrupting pollen, sets down his crippling grasp as well on the ground, and this guy, oh my gosh, just gets melted in it. And there you see again holding his ground against the 2 players and just turning and burning them. Really, really nice. Alright, so in this next clip here, we're just going to see a little bit of the tank of this build. There you see the Meteor come down. We get the Fear from the Nightblade. Got quite a few enemy players. Not only is he going to tank with the ultimate, but he's going to turn with the Dolimish proc and actually burn a player down and kill him there. So just to look at the turn and burn of this build. Now, a lot of this footage is little separate clips. That's just kind of what Pazuzu sent me, but it does really highlight what you can do on this build. I like this clip here because you see he pops the Nightblade with his Permafrost, and after the Permafrost pop, does a really great job kind of reading the stun from the Permafrost, and there you see that huge combination damage with the Permafrost into the Dolimish, and just showing you how quickly you can burst with this really tanky build. It's very interesting. And then in this last clip here, you see he goes into the Permafrost. This guy's going to blast him with a little bit of damage, gets a big stun with the Permafrost, and yet again, you get to see that huge amounts of burst. What a huge smack. Oh my gosh, for a max HP Warden to just tear into somebody like that. It's very, very impressive. So that is unfortunately all the footage that Pazuzu sent me. So I want to just say a massive thank you and a massive shout out to Pazuzu for sending in the build. It was really awesome. I hope that you guys like this build too. If you did like this video, hit that like button. If you guys are new to my channel, hit that subscribe button. If you guys want to catch me for live gameplay on Twitch or just come hang out, you guys can check out my Twitch channel. And then, of course, you guys can send in your own community content to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They are a VPN for gamers. So if you guys get crap ping, they might help you out. And there you go, guys. That is everything I got for you today. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next time.